One man's trash became a $1 million empire, but the moment Carson Blair realized who was behind it, everything he thought he knew about success crumbled like wet cardboard. The fluorescent lights hummed their tired song above Meridian Towers. 42nd floor. Carson Blair, CEO of Drummond Industries, stood at his corner office window, watching the city breathe below. His reflection stared back, sharp suit, sharper jawline, eyes that measured quarterly profits and heartbeats. Behind him, his assistant's voice cut through the morning calm. "Sir, the waste management report you requested." Carson didn't turn. "Bottom line it for me, Nia. Disposal costs are up 18%. We're hemorrhaging money on things people throw away without thinking." He finally pivoted, studying the thick folder in Nia Rhodes's hands. Numbers, charts, graphs, all painting the same picture. Waste wasn't just an environmental problem. It was bleeding his company dry. "Schedule a meeting with facility management," he said. "This ends now." But what Carson didn't know was that 3 floors below, a single father with calloused hands and a daughter's drawing taped to his cleaning cart was about to turn his corporate world inside out. Jonah Clayton pushed his cart down the pristine hallway, the squeak of one stubborn wheel echoing off marble walls. At 34, he'd learned that invisibility was a janitor's superpower. People talked around him like he was furniture, shared secrets like he was deaf, dropped things like he was a walking trash can. Tonight felt different, though. Tonight, something electric hummed in the air, not just the building's HVAC system, but anticipation. Changed, he paused outside the executive conference room, where a meeting had run late. Through the glass, he could see abandoned coffee cups, crumpled papers, and the detritus of corporate decision-making. But as he entered to clean, one discarded prototype caught his EYE.IT was supposed to be trash. Instead, it looked like possibility. Before we dive deeper, tell us, where are you watching from tonight? And when this story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Because what happens next will make you question everything you think you know about who gets to change the world. The cleaning carts will squeak once more as Jonah picked up that discarded prototype, and somewhere in the building's steel bones, destiny shifted. The prototype felt warm in Jonah's hands, like it had been waiting for someone to see its potential. Plastic housing, simple circuitry, a design so elegant it hurt to think someone had thrown it away. Jonah Clayton lived in the space between worlds, too educated for his job, too poor for his dreams. MIT dropout, single father, night shift janitor. The math didn't add up on paper, but life rarely did. Home in their cramped studio apartment. 8-year-old Mabel sat at their kitchen table, homework spread like battle plans. Her curls caught the lamplight as she chewed her pencil eraser, working through fractions with the same intensity she applied to everything else. "Dad, what's this?" She held up the prototype he'd absent-mindedly carried home. "Something someone didn't want," he said, kissing the top of her head. The apartment smelled like mac and cheese and hope. Always hope, even when the rent was 3 days late. "But it looks important." Jonah examined it closer. The device was designed for inventory tracking, but the circuitry was all wrong. Too complex for its stated purpose, too simple for what it could become. His fingers traced the connections, muscle memory from engineering classes he'd abandoned when Mabel's mother died. "Maybe it is important, sweetheart." That night, after Mabel fell asleep clutching her stuffed dragon, Jonah sat at their secondhand laptop. The prototype connected via Bluetooth, its data streaming across his screen in patterns that made his pulse quicken. It wasn't just an inventory tracker. It was the foundation for something revolutionary, a waste reduction system that could learn, adapt, predict. Someone at Drummond Industries had been onto something huge and hadn't even realized it. Jonah's reflection stared back from the laptop screen, superimposed over lines of code. He looked tired, older than 34, but his eyes held something that hadn't been there in years: purpose. Meanwhile, 42 floors above, Carson Blair stood in his empty office, staring at quarterly projections that painted an increasingly grim picture. Waste disposal costs weren't just rising. They were becoming unsustainable. His phone buzzed. A text from his ex-wife. "Axel's recital is Thursday. Try to show up this time." Carson set the phone down without responding. He'd missed the last 3 recitals, 2 birthday parties, and countless bedtime stories. Success, he'd learned, was a jealous mistress. But success was about to get complicated. Because in a studio apartment across town, a janitor was about to transform discarded dreams into something that would shake the very foundations of corporate America, and neither man knew their lives were about to collide in ways that would change everything. The discovery happened at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Jonah had been tinkering with the prototype for weeks, reverse engineering its potential during stolen moments between diaper changes and dishwashing. Mabel helped, her 8-year-old logic cutting through complexity like a knife through butter. What if it could talk to other things? She asked one evening, building a tower from empty cereal boxes while Jonah soldered components. Like what? Like the garbage cans. Like the recycling bins. Like everything that gets thrown away. The idea hit him like lightning. Within days, he'd jury-rigged a network using discarded electronics he'd salvaged from Drummond Industries dumpsters. Old smartphones, broken tablets, defunct sensors, all breathing new life under his careful hands. The system he built was elegant in its simplicity. Each waste receptacle became a data point, tracking not just volume but content, patterns, inefficiencies. It learned from user behavior, predicted peak disposal times, optimized collection routes. Dad, it's like the building is getting smarter, Mabel observed, watching data flow across his laptop screen in mesmerizing patterns. No, sweetheart. It's like we're finally listening to what the building was trying to tell us all along. But Jonah's late-night engineering sessions hadn't gone unnoticed. Esme Holloway, head of facilities management, prided herself on knowing every bolt and breaker in Meridian Tower. When maintenance reports started showing anomalies, sensors appearing in waste management systems, data streams coming from sources that shouldn't exist, she knew someone was playing outside the sandbox. Sir, she said, sliding a folder across Carson's desk. We have a situation. Carson looked up from his morning coffee, already dreading another crisis. Define situation. Someone's been hacking our waste management infrastructure, installing unauthorized equipment, creating networks we can't control. Security breach? That's what I thought. But then I looked at the data they're collecting. She opened the folder, revealing charts and graphs that made Carson's breath catch. Waste disposal efficiency was up 43% in sectors where the mystery modifications had been installed. Cost savings were projected in the hundreds of thousands. Who's behind this? Still working on that. But Carson, Esme's voice dropped. Whoever they are, they're brilliant. That evening, Carson found himself walking floors he'd never visited, seeing his building through different eyes. In the janitorial supply closet on the 39th floor, he discovered something that made his blood run cold: components. Schematics. Evidence of the most sophisticated DIY engineering project he'd ever seen. But it was the child's drawing taped to the wall that stopped him dead, a crayon sketch of a man and a little girl, standing beside a tower made of recycled cans, both smiling like they'd discovered treasure at the bottom, in careful 8-year-old handwriting. Daddy makes broken things work again. Carson stared at that drawing for a long time, thinking about his own son Axel, about missed recitals and broken promises. When was the last time someone had drawn him as a hero? His phone buzzed. A text from building security. Found your hacker. You're not going to believe this. The security footage was grainy, time-stamped 11:47 p.m. the previous night. A man in a janitor's uniform, working with careful precision, installing a sensor in the executive floor's recycling center. Carson leaned closer to the screen, studying the man's face. He'd seen those hands before. Emptying his trash, cleaning his conference room, invisible as air. The night shift janitor wasn't just maintaining the building, he was revolutionizing it. Carson Blair had built his empire on calculated risks and measured responses. But standing in the basement of his own building at midnight, watching a janitor transform corporate waste management through sheer ingenuity, calculation felt inadequate. Mr. Clayton? Jonah looked up from his work, a half-assembled sensor array spread across a maintenance table. His hands stilled, but his eyes didn't show fear, just the quiet resignation of a man who'd been caught doing something he believed in. Mr. Blair. Jonah straightened, wiping his hands on a shop rag. I can explain. I'm hoping you can. The basement hummed with the building's mechanical heartbeat. Pumps, fans, the subtle symphony of infrastructure. Between them sat months of salvaged electronics, transformed into something that shouldn't have been possible with cast-off parts and borrowed time. You've been stealing, Carson said. Salvaging, Jonah corrected quietly. Taking what you were, paying to throw away, and making it useful. Carson picked up a modified tablet, its screen displaying real-time waste flow data. This is corporate espionage. This is problem solving. The words hung between them like a challenge. Carson had expected apologies, excuses, maybe tears. Instead, he got truth delivered with the calm confidence of a man who knew his work spoke for itself. Show me, Carson said. For the next hour, Jonah walked him through the system. Not the corporate presentation version, the real thing. Messy, improvised, brilliant. Each component told a story of innovation born from necessity. The sensors learn user patterns, Jonah explained, his voice gaining strength as he spoke his native language of engineering. Peak disposal times, content classification, optimal routing. Your waste management costs have dropped 43% in modified sectors. I saw the reports, but you didn't see this. Jonah pulled up a projection model. Full building implementation could save Drummond Industries $800,000 annually. And that's just the beginning. Carson studied the numbers, his business. Mind racing. You built this in your spare time. Mabel helped. My daughter. She sees patterns I miss. How old is she? 8. Carson thought of his own son, Axel, and felt something twist in his chest. When was the last time he'd included Axel in his work? When was the last time they'd built something together? Why didn't you come to me? Pitch this through proper channels. Jonah's smile was sad, knowing. You think a night shift janitor gets meetings with the CEO? You think anyone would have listened? The truth of it hit like cold water. Carson's empire was built on hierarchies, on knowing your place. Men like Jonah Clayton didn't get to be innovators. They got to empty trash cans and stay invisible. What do you want? Carson asked. Nothing you can give me. Try me. Jonah was quiet for a long moment, studying Carson's face. I want my daughter to grow up in a world where being smart matters more than where you started, where solutions count, more than pedigree. And if I offered you a position? Chief Innovation Officer, 6-figure salary, corner office. I'd ask what happens to the 8 other janitors on the night shift when you automate their jobs away. Carson blinked. He hadn't expected that. You're worried about other people's jobs. I'm worried about other people's families. In the mechanical hum of the basement, Carson Blair felt something he hadn't experienced in years, shame. Not for his success, but for how narrow his definition of it had become. There's something else, Jonah said quietly. Something you need to know about your waste stream data. He pulled up another screen, this one showing patterns that made Carson's blood run cold. Someone's been embezzling through false disposal reports, claiming phantom waste removal services, inflating vendor contracts. It's hidden in the quarterly numbers, but the sensors don't lie. Carson stared at the evidence, hundreds of thousands. In fraudulent charges, systematic theft hidden behind the mundane paperwork of waste management. Who? That's not my call to make. But it was Carson's call. And in that moment, standing in a basement transformed by one man's vision and integrity, he realized that everything he thought he knew about his company was about to change. The question was, what would he do about it? The revelation hit Carson's inner circle like a controlled demolition. Precise, devastating, and impossible to ignore. Reed Mercer, Drummond Industries CFO and Carson's oldest friend, sat across the conference table looking like a man who'd swallowed glass. The evidence was overwhelming. 18 months of inflated disposal contracts, phantom service charges, a paper trail that led directly to his signature. Reed, Carson said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of 20 years of friendship. Tell me there's an explanation. There is. Reed's hands trembled as he reached for his coffee cup. My son. Stage for lymphoma. The treatments insurance won't cover, the experimental trials. His voice cracked. Do you know what hope costs when you're desperate enough to buy it? The room fell silent except for the whisper of climate control and the distant hum of a city that never slept. Carson felt his world tilting off its axis. Reed wasn't just his CFO. He was Axel's godfather, the best man at his wedding, the brother he'd chosen rather than been born with. $200,000, Carson said, reading from Jonah's meticulously compiled report. That's what you've stolen. That's what I've borrowed, Reed corrected, desperation bleeding through his composure. I was going to pay it back. The new contract with Morrison Tech, the quarterly bonuses, with what money, Reed? With profits built on fraudulent expenses. Across town, in a studio apartment that smelled like tomato soup and second chances, Mabel Clayton sat at their kitchen table working on a school project about heroes. She'd chosen her father, not because he fought villains or wore a cape, but because he fixed broken things. What does integrity mean? She asked, looking up from her carefully crafted poster board. Jonah paused in his dinner preparations, grilled cheese, and the eternal optimism of a father stretching grocery money until payday. It means doing the right thing even when it's hard, even when it costs you something. Like when Tommy stole Sarah's lunch money, and I told the teacher even though Tommy said he'd never be my friend again. Exactly like that. Mabel nodded solemnly and returned to her project, adding another carefully colored star to her father's paper crown. But Jonah's phone was buzzing with messages he wasn't sure he wanted to read. Back in the conference room, Carson made the hardest decision of his professional life. You're fired, Reed. Security will escort you out. And I'm calling the district attorney. Reed's face crumpled. Carson, please. My son. Your son needs a father with integrity, not stolen money. You're destroying my family. You did that the moment you chose theft over trust. As security led Reed away, Carson stood alone in his conference room, staring at the evidence that a night shift janitor had uncovered through nothing more than honest observation and moral courage. His phone rang. The caller ID made his stomach clench. St. Mary's Hospital. Mr. Blair? This is Dr. Martinez. Your son Axel was brought in an hour ago. Bicycle accident. He's asking for you. The 42 floors to the parking garage had never felt so far. Carson drove through city streets blurred by tears he hadn't shed in years, thinking about Reed's desperation, about the lies people tell themselves when fear becomes their compass. But mostly he thought about Axel, about missed recitals and broken promises, about the distance he'd built between himself and the only thing that really mattered, the hospital. Axel lay in a bed too big for his 12-year-old frame, his left arm in a cast, his eyes bright with pain medication and the particular bravery of children who haven't learned to fear mortality. Dad, I'm here, buddy. I wasn't wearing my helmet. Carson smoothed his son's hair, remembering doing the same thing when Axel was Mabel's age. We'll get you a new one. The coolest one they make. Will you help me pick it out? The question was simple, but Carson heard the years of accumulated disappointment underneath it. How many times had he promised to be there and failed? How many opportunities had he traded for quarterly gains? Yes, he said, and meant it. I'll help you pick it out. That night, Carson sat in the hospital waiting room while Axel slept, thinking about heroes and villains, about the difference between success and significance. His phone buzzed. Jonah Clayton, calling it nearly midnight. Mr. Blair, I heard about your son. I wanted to say, if there's anything I can do. Carson closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the simple kindness from a man he'd barely begun to understand. Thank you, Jonah. That means more than you know. Family first, sir. Everything else is just details. As Carson hung up, he realized that somewhere in the space between Reed's betrayal and Axel's accident, between corporate theft and a janitor's integrity, he'd lost sight of the only equation that really mattered. The question was whether it was too late to solve for what he'd given away. Recovery has its own rhythm, slower than ambition, deeper than profit margins. Carson spent the next 3 days at Axel's bedside, watching his son sleep and thinking about the empire he'd built while his family grew around its edges. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and regret, but also like possibility. Dad, Axel's voice was fuzzy with medication. Are you going to stay this time? The question cut deeper than Reed's betrayal, more precise than any audit. Carson had spent 12 years being a provider instead of a father, mistaking financial security for emotional presence. Yes, buddy, I'm staying. Even when I get better. Carson took his son's uninjured hand, feeling how small it was, how much trust it held, especially when you get better. That afternoon, while Axel napped, Carson made a call that surprised even him. Jonah, it's Carson Blair. I have a proposition. They met in the hospital cafeteria, an unlikely setting for a conversation that would reshape both their lives. Jonah arrived carrying a thermos that smelled like fresh coffee and a manila folder thick with possibilities. How's your son? Jonah asked, sliding into the plastic chair across from Carson. Healing. Kids are resilient. So are dads, when they remember how to try. Carson studied the man across from him. The calloused hands, the careful way he spoke, the intelligence that blazed quietly behind tired eyes. I want to offer you something. Not a job, a partnership. Jonah's eyebrows rose. Partnership? Your waste management system. It's brilliant, but it's bigger than waste management. The pattern recognition, the predictive algorithms, they could revolutionize supply chain optimization, inventory management, resource allocation. You want to buy my work. I want to build it. With you. Equal partners, equal shares, equal say. In how it develops. Jonah was quiet for a long moment, stirring coffee that didn't need stirring. What about the janitors? The people whose jobs this might eliminate. We retrain them. Make them system operators, data analysts, efficiency specialists. Nobody gets left behind. And if it fails, then we fail together. But Jonah, Carson leaned forward. I don't think it's going to fail. Jonah opened his folder, revealing sketches and schematics that took Carson's breath away. The waste management system was just the beginning. Supply chain optimization, environmental impact modeling, corporate efficiency algorithms that could save companies millions while reducing their ecological footprint. Mabel drew these. Carson asked, studying a diagram that mapped resource flow with the clarity of a child's logic. She sees things differently. No preconceptions about how systems should work, just how they could work. Carson thought about his own son, about the creative energy he'd channeled into business instead of imagination. I'd like to meet her. She'd like that. She's been asking about the man who owns the building her dad fixed. They shook hands across the cafeteria table, sealing a partnership built on mutual respect rather than corporate hierarchy. But Carson had one more surprise. There's something else. Reed's theft, the money he stole. I'm not writing it off as a loss. What are you doing with it? Starting a foundation for families dealing with medical crises. The Reed Mercer Memorial Fund. Jonah looked confused. Memorial? Is he? No, but the friend I thought I knew is. This is for who he could have been if he'd asked for help instead of taking what wasn't his. That evening, Carson brought Axel to meet Mabel Clayton. The two children sized each other up with the solemn intensity of diplomats, then immediately began planning improvements to the hospital's woefully inefficient vending machine placement. Your dad's going to work with my dad, Mabel announced, as if she'd always known this day would come. Cool. Does that mean we're friends now? We're family now? There's a difference. Carson and Jonah exchanged glances over their children's heads, both thinking the same thing. Sometimes the wisest voices in the room speak with 8-year-old clarity. Outside the hospital window, the city sparkled with a million lights, each one representing a life, a story, a possibility waiting to unfold. Carson had spent years seeing those lights as profit centers or market segments. Tonight, for the first time, he saw them as home. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Tuesday that would redefine everything. Carson stood at the podium. In Drummond Industries' main conference room, looking out at faces that ranged from curious to skeptical to openly hostile. Financial reporters, industry analysts, and board members who'd spent the weekend trying to understand how their CEO had partnered with a janitor. Beside him, Jonah wore his cleanest shirt and the quiet confidence of a man who'd stopped apologizing for his intelligence. In the front row, Mabel sat next to Axel, both children holding signs they'd made. Team Brilliant in rainbow crayon. Ladies and gentlemen, Carson began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to announce. 3 months ago, I thought I understood what innovation looked like. I was wrong. He clicked to his first slide, not a corporate presentation, but a photo of Jonah's basement workshop, all salvaged parts and impossible dreams made real. Innovation doesn't come from corner offices or MBA programs. It comes from curiosity, from necessity, from people brave enough to see solutions where others see problems. The room stirred. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Today, I'm announcing the launch of Clayton Blair Technologies, a partnership dedicated to transforming corporate waste into technological opportunity. Our first product, the Meridian system, will revolutionize how companies think about efficiency, sustainability, and human potential. He clicked again. The screen filled with impressive numbers, projected savings, environmental impact reductions, job creation statistics. But Carson wasn't reading from the slides. My partner, Jonah Clayton, built this system from components my company was paying to throw away. He saw potential where we saw garbage, value where we saw waste. Mr. Blair interrupted a reporter from Financial Weekly. With respect, how do we know this isn't just an expensive publicity stunt? Your partner has no corporate experience, no advanced degree. He has something better, Carson replied. He has integrity. The room fell silent. 3 months ago, my CFO was arrested for embezzling $200,000. He hid his theft in fraudulent waste management reports. Jonah Clayton could have looked the other way. Instead, he brought me evidence that saved my company and preserved jobs for 300 employees. Carson paused, looking directly at the camera broadcasting live to financial markets worldwide. Mr. Clayton didn't expose this fraud for money or recognition. He did it because it was right. That's the kind of partner I want. That's the kind of company I want to lead. Jonah stepped to the microphone, his voice clear and steady. 3 years ago, I was cleaning offices and raising my daughter on $30,000 a year. I wasn't looking to change the world. I was just trying to make my corner of it a little better. He gestured to the children in the front row. But kids see possibilities where adults see limitations. My daughter asked why we throw away so much when we could fix so much. I didn't have a good answer, so I tried to find one. The Meridian system isn't just about corporate efficiency, Jonah continued. It's about remembering that the person emptying your trash might have the idea that saves your company. That innovation lives everywhere. You just have to be willing to listen. The questions came fast and sharp. Market projections, competitive analysis, scalability concerns. Carson and Jonah answered as a team, their different perspectives creating a fuller picture than either could have painted alone. But it was the final question that cut to the heart of everything. Mr. Blair, why risk your reputation on an unproven partnership with someone from outside your industry? Carson looked at Jonah, then at their children, then at the room full of skeptical faces. Because 3 months ago, I thought success meant maximizing profit and minimizing risk. I learned I was optimizing for the wrong variables. He clicked to his final slide, a photo of Mabel's school project, the one about heroes. Real success isn't about building empires. It's about building bridges between what is and what could be, between who we are and who we're capable of becoming. The room erupted in questions, but Carson was done talking. He'd said what needed. Saying as the crowd dispersed, Mabel tugged on Carson's sleeve. Mr. Blair? Yes, sweetheart. Daddy says you used to be sad. Are you still sad? Carson knelt to her level, thinking about missed recitals and found purpose, about friendship lost and partnership gained. Not anymore, Mabel. Not anymore. Outside, the city hummed with its eternal rhythm of possibility and promise. Somewhere in its steel and glass heart, a million small innovations waited to be discovered by those brave enough to see treasure in what others discarded. The future, Carson realized, belonged to the bridge builders. 6 months later, the Meridian system was operational in 47 buildings across 12 cities. Carson stood in his old office, now shared with Jonah, watching their children collaborate on homework at the conference table. Mabel helped Axel with fractions while he explained soccer strategies, their friendship as natural as breathing. The Jakarta installation went live this morning, Jonah reported, looking up from his laptop. 23% efficiency improvement in the first week. And the job displacement? 0. Every maintenance worker got promoted to system operator. Some are earning more than they ever thought possible. Carson smiled, remembering when such numbers would have meant quarterly bonuses and shareholder approval. Now they meant families with stable futures and communities with sustainable hope. The phone rang. Reed Mercer calling from the rehabilitation center where he was serving his sentence through community service. His son's treatment was funded by the foundation Carson had established. Not charity, but restoration. Carson, the environmental impact data just came in. You're going to want to see this. Reed's voice carried something Carson hadn't heard in years, genuine excitement, unmarked by desperation or guilt. What are we looking at? If current trends continue, the Meridian installations will prevent 18 million pounds of waste from reaching landfills this year. 18 million. Carson closed his eyes, feeling the weight of numbers that measured more than profit. Reed, yeah, come see us when you're ready. There's a place for you here if you want it. A long pause. Even after everything. Especially after everything. That evening, the four of them, Carson, Jonah, Mabel, and Axel, sat in the hospital cafeteria where the partnership had begun. It had become their tradition, this monthly dinner in plastic chairs under fluorescent lights. Dad, Axel said, building a tower from sugar packets. Remember when you used to work all the time? I remember. I like this better. Me too, buddy. Mabel looked up from her sketchbook, where she was designing what she called a friendship detector, a device that could identify when people needed connection more than they needed space. Mr. Carson, do you think grown-ups forgot how to see magic? What do you mean? Like, how my dad saw treasure in the trash. How you saw family in a janitor. How broken things can become the most beautiful things if you know how to fix them right. Carson, thought about empire and partnership, about success and significance, about the difference between building walls and building bridges. I think some grown-ups forget, sweetheart. But the good news is, it's never too late to remember. Outside the hospital windows, the city sparkled with infinite possibility. Tomorrow, there would be new problems to solve, new connections to make, new treasure to discover in what others had discarded. But tonight, there was this. For people who'd found family in unexpected places, sharing cafeteria sandwiches and dreams too big for any single heart to hold. So there it is. The story of how a single dad's late-night innovation transformed not just a company, but our entire understanding of where brilliance lives and how recognition works. Where are you watching from tonight? And what would you rate this story from 0 to 10? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and your words matter more than you know. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that heroes don't always wear suits or carry degrees, hit that subscribe button. Because there are a million stories waiting in the margins, in the overlooked corners, in the hands of people we've trained ourselves not to see. Remember, the person fixing what's broken might just be the person who breaks everything open. Until next time, keep looking for treasure in unexpected places.